Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about what is going on right now in Japan. Modern Pokemon cards are erupting, everything from waifus, Poncho Pikachus, Scream Pikachus, waifus, Festa Pikachus, Mario Pikachus, waifus, alt arts, prize cards, and waifus have dramatically increased in the past couple weeks, and people just want to know what's going on. What happened to older rare minter better? Now we have younger she/her minter better. Like, that's the new 2023 motto. But I think there is a lot to talk about here in relation to what we're experiencing. In my opinion, I think it's two sleeping giants activating, being Japan and China, which I'll break down. We're also talking about a lot of similarities and differences because I think Japan's having a bit of a 2020 over there with all this very fast meteoric rise and interest in Pokemon. So I think that Japan is the first of the two giants, and why I call it that is because Japan has been around, but it's been very steady, consistent, yet low key. It's been there doing its thing, but you really don't have a lot of like the flip culture, entrepreneur culture over there like you do here. So it's a quiet, consistent like stream, if you will, that's been going and growing incrementally over time. But you really just didn't have this like flippage that you do now. A lot of the scalping is a very new thing over there, where that's been going on forever. I mean, 10 years ago, I remember on E4, you had people hustling and grinding, where, back then in Japan, that just wasn't a thing. More importantly, Japan did not really track with what was going on in 2020 overseas. With all the WotC boom and things like that, yeah, you maybe had a couple things that went with the inertia of like base set, maybe Japanese base set went up and down. But overall, Japanese was still pretty chill. It didn't have a direct one-to-one explosion in 2020, 2021, where now you're really experiencing that. And more specifically, I think as we speak, there's still a lot of cards on the radar. Basically, anything with an old back is just flying steady. A lot of that really hasn't exploded, maybe outside of like prize cards, certain items here or there. Now, China is the other sleeping giant, in my opinion, that I think needs a little bit more of a breakdown, because someone like Japan or the UK or most of Europe, they've been in the game for a minute. Like, they've been here since the jump. And what I mean by that is you knew about collectors or interacted with collectors and sellers and all of that, where China was just pretty much a zero until the past couple of years. So they had no real footprint until even 6 months ago. They really did not have much of a footprint, especially pre-2020. So I think that's a really good starting point about why they are the sleeping giant. And also, when you're talking about giant, they're one of the biggest countries in human history. So 1% of a billion, 10 million people. So even just a drop of that, you add one of that to your recipe, especially if you're talking about Festa Pikachus or something that has some limitation, naturally that's going to create this uptick. Now, while we're talking about that, there's certain cards I think are definitely very bubbly. I think they're very Squirtle bubble move right now. I think they're going to withdraw. I think some of them are probably going to chill out, especially the cards in production. But, some of these prize cards that are 5, maybe 10 years old now, that I don't know where you can get them in mass. I don't know how to buy them today, yesterday's prices anymore, because they aren't in production. Those might hold better than others. Down the road, we'll see all that. But ultimately, this is what's happening. I think another thing with China to talk about is that it's a risky thing to say, but I think it's relevant, is it's a way for them to hide money. It's a way for them to put money into something. It's a big reason why all this crypto stuff took off. It's just another vehicle, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. I don't like to get into the culture of all that stuff, but it is, I think, part of the equation. It's a way for people to put money into something that they think is rare, that they enjoy, and they're like, okay, maybe this will retain its value. That's just another angle I think that does come into play, specifically for China. Now, if that's not enough of a breakdown, we're going to do some similarities and some differences in relation to 2020, because I hear a lot of people saying this is like Japan's 2020. I promise I did not want to talk about 2020 anymore, but it's just relevant to what's going on right now. I think the similarities are that you are having price spikes for certain cards. When we talk about waifus, they're definitely going up. But if you have a male on the card, like our boy Professor Sycamore over here, his price is flatlining. If there's a girl on there, it's going up, but any male waifu is just chilling. So it is certain cards. It's not every single modern Japanese Pokemon card. But these are some, like I sold a Poncho Pikachu, Sapparo's Pikachu today. In the beginning of summer, we have a Sapparo's Pikachu, nothing but winter going on, sold right before I sat down. So there are certain cards, like the Ponchos and the waifus and, Scream Pikachus and then the waifus. There's a lot of the very, very trendy cards, I think, are trending, but there's plenty, even within the same category. Like, here's a full art male trainer, and he's pretty mid. He's doing the same thing he was a week ago and a month ago. Still in research, still has not graduated. So that's one thing. I think another thing is that you have like that same vibe of like people lining up to get the new thing, like the FOMO, where people are going to get the Nagaba EVs, right? They're like breaking the Pokemon Center, breaking the internet to get those Nagaba EVs because they got to make that $20. That's the thing. And I'm not trying to dog those people, but that's the reality. Like, you're lining up to make that $20 to $50 flip, probably because you enjoy it. But this whole thing is happening, which is very 2020. It's very shining fates, scalpage, all that stuff that we were experiencing before. It's happening now in Japan, and this is still a new thing. Even if it was there a bit, a 25th anniversary, pick your poison. There were certain times when it happened. This isn't the first edition print run, but it's still very early. It's not something that's been happening for, years now, like it has been in the US. And also another thing is that supply is back to like being limited. Distributors are allocated. I can't just add zeros to my orders anymore. There was a nice little window in there where I was getting majority of my orders, but now it's back to touch and go. I put in however many cases, I'm probably getting 20% of that. I hope I get in the next round X amount of cases I won in the beginning. Maybe I'll get 30% of it in the second wave. So that's back, but it's doing it again. And I think it funnels into, this just insane demand. So for the differences, though, I think this is where it gets interesting, because this thing that's happening in Japan isn't just set cards. That's where we're going to start, because in the US, I think most of it was like WotC, maybe some Gold Star action, but a lot of it was just WotC. It was walked out the closet. That's what everybody did. My friends at hockey during this time were sending me pictures of their cards. Everybody walked it out of the closet. They got their WotC cards. That was the main game, a few years ago. Where what's interesting about this thing in Japan is it's not just set cards. In fact, I think it's, if not even more tilted to like these specialized cards, even things like ponchos, that's still Japanese exclusive. It was only given out at a certain time, a certain way. Yeah, it might not be like super like Art Academy trophy card rarity, but it still has some limitation or uniqueness to it. And you're seeing more of that with this interest here. In fact, a lot of what China is interested in are these Japanese prize cards. Like, my biggest hitters or my most interested items are Japanese prize cards from any era. Even the old backs are getting attention. Everything from like Unicarp to, LP promos, Daisuke promos, things like that. There's a lot of Chinese interest in those Japanese prize cards. So I think that's what's interesting, is that it's not this like reignited experience that was 2020 because of the circumstances of, being in quarantine or Logan Paul, whatever the reasons may be. Like, this is just the market right now. And we're trying to figure out what's going on, but it's not like this one easy excuse of like, yeah, Logan put out that video that got more views than the new iPhone, and that's why everything blew up. This is more of just like the market moving that way, with, I think, mainly Japan and China. Also, another interesting thing is no hesitation. Like, when people want something, they just buy it. Like, my Festas, I sold about 4 or 5 of these Festas recently. I just wake up and I got sales. Like, no haggling, no like, what do you think of this? What will this do if I buy this? How much you think it'll go up? That was a big 2020 thing. I had so many like, give me some free financial advice with my purchase messages, where this is just straight, no hesitation, buy and buy. Like, that's it. They say, buy it and see you later. Like, that's what's going on. Another thing is that in relation to no hesitation, none of this stuff is being flipped. Like, back in 2020, people were buying Charizard, flipping Charizard, same day. Buying it, putting in someone else's address because they already flipped it to that guy, But that's what was happening then, where this is different. People are not flipping this. Like, when it goes to China, it just goes into like a dark abyss. Like, it just disappears. At least maybe it's a little biased for me because I am dealing with like the rare items, from my end, but I've heard a lot of people on E4 echo the same thing, where we're the Chinese resellers. A lot of the stuff that goes to China, it's like a one-way trip. So that's another interesting thing, because back in not only 2020, but before that even, 2016 and forward, you had people that were trying to be a little more aggressive, trying to hustle. I get it. Back in the smpratte days, the cat sitting money and the grind era, you had a lot of that going on, where that's not happening with this thing in Japan right now. It's people just buy and buy. Like, they buy it and they're out. They're not trying to make a quick flip. So I think that's, to me, the most interesting part of this is not only that it's not just WotC cards and like this reignited nostalgic trip. It's people going after specific cards that aren't just set cards, that are a little bit further in the game past the Safari Zone. Like, you really have to know what you're doing. Like, I'm impressed how quickly people know what cards are rare and what cards are still in production. I know the waifu ones, they got people tripping. Like, some of these waifu cards people are buying, I'm like, this stuff, I don't want to know. It makes no sense. There's no gravity to it whatsoever. You can't make any sense of it. Like, you can put all the Pokemon minds together and we're all just going to be like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with this waifu stuff. So outside of the waifus, I'm impressed how people understand, the release for a fan club card, or the release for, an art academy or a Unicarp or whatever it is, pick your poison. They're acquiring knowledge much more rapidly than back in the day where you had to grind out for years searching archive forums and putting all this together and then yelling at you in a grandma house about it. This is something that they're doing overnight. They're going after good cards fast. And this is the result of that. A mixture of these two sleeping giants. China has a ton of interest in Japan. You only need like a fraction of the 1% of 10 million people to really make this stuff move, because again, they're going after cards that aren't, outside the waifus, they're going after cards that aren't in mass. A lot of this stuff has some type of rarity to it. And I think moving forward, a lot of people want to know, how is this all going to settle out? Because a lot of us now have experienced, the 2020 rodeo, or maybe you're here for 2016 or prior, and we've been to this rodeo now. This is like the third, fourth, fifth time we're experiencing this. What's going to happen? Is this bubble going to burst? Everything's going to pitfall? I think for a lot of these cards that are being bought today, it's going to be hard to buy them at yesterday's prices. It's going to be the classic smpratism that I'm going to dust off here. Where's the cheaper option? For a lot of, like, for the festivals, like, keep it real. Like, I want to know where the cheaper option is. Like, I will pay you for the cheaper option, but it doesn't exist. And more specifically, like, I'm doing exactly what I was doing with these when they were $500, when they were $300, when they were $200. I'm doing the same exact thing I am regardless of the price. But the bottom line is, where's the cheaper option for some of this stuff? For a lot of the set cards, it's still in production. I can get lucky and pull that alt art or whatever thing is trending right now, the Moon Beyond or whatever thing's happening. You can still pull that. There's still a cheaper option for that probably. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be a one-to-one with what we experienced in 2020. If a lot of people are banking on that, I think there will be certain cards that will come down. I don't know if it's going to be waifus. They make no sense to me, but there will be some that will hit a lower price. There will be some that will do the classic Squirtle evolution of bubble, withdrawal, and they'll stay down there. And some might hydro pump again, but I think there's some that are going to really come down. But for a lot of the prize stuff, genuinely asking, where is the cheaper option? Because it's one of those things where you're talking about cards now, especially they're 7 years old or things like that, like these ponchos, the Scream Pikachu, like that stuff is long gone. Like, those days of easy buys are long gone. It's been a grind for a minute now, and I think this just accelerates that grind for those type of cards. But yeah, for the set stuff, it'll be interesting. I think there's going to be a cool off, especially if Pokemon keeps producing, the newest set or whatever it is. I think it's going to help cool that stuff off. But yeah, that is what is happening right now in Japan. It's absolute mania. It's like the classic chaos and opportunity. I think there's some quote out there how they have similar characters fitting in Chinese or something like that, where they're similar, because in chaos there is a lot of opportunity, and that's what we're experiencing right now. It's a very volatile, I guess, exciting time. Maybe a little scared as well, because this waifu stuff creeps me out, as I ranted forever in Patreon about. But that's what I have for it. I do think there is a mixture of these sleeping giants of Japan and China, and those are the similarities and differences that I see. But as always, guys, let me know what you think about all this. I think it's a fun topic that we can probably keep exploring as things develop. But there it is. You know the deal. Let me know how I feel. That's pretty much it. Till next time.